Okay, so this is the February wrap-up video. I'll talk about everything I read in February, pick out my book of the month, and then talk about what I'm going to read in March. Now, it was a really cold month here in Montana this month of February, so I was able to read quite a bit. And for all of these books that I read this month, I will post links to all of the videos that I put out on these if you want more information on any of them. So the first book I read was Startide Rising by David Brin, and this was a buddy read with Joseph over at Joseph Reads Books. We both really like this book. I did feel like I was lost in parts of this book, mostly because of the dolphin characters. It was hard for me to differentiate them. Joseph gave me a really good tip, and some commenters also left these tips that there's some kind of fan sites that show you some pictures, artist renditions of some of these characters to kind of help keep it kind of in line in your head as you're reading through this book, because I was not really prepared. There's parts of this book that were very intricate with the plot and these characters, and I felt like I lost some of my way reading through this, but I really, really enjoyed it. I definitely want to go back and read the first book that he wrote in this trilogy, then reread this, and then read the final book in the trilogy, because he really did a lot of really cool, interesting things in this one, and I want to give it another shot. But we both really enjoyed it. We had a great discussion on that one, so like I said, I'll post that video down in the description. Next up was To Your Scattered Bodies Go by Philip Jose Farmer. And this was another buddy read with Brian over at Bad Taste Books. And this probably wasn't the best book to do a buddy review on. It's a very interesting book, and Philip Jose Farmer came up with a pretty interesting science fiction concept here. But there's not really a lot to talk about. It's a pretty basic premise, and I'd read this one before. I've always wanted to know what happens further in this series, so I do want to read more. I'm going to maybe try to get through the whole series this year, but it sounds like most people say you end up kind of petering out somewhere around the third or fourth book. But Brian and I still had a great time talking about that one. Philip Jose Farmer has his own kind of unique brand of weirdness that's in that book, and so had a lot of fun and would like to do some more read-alongs with Brian in the future. And then I read The Star Virus by Barrington J. Bailey. This is a very short novel that Bailey wrote, and I love this one. It's very dark. It can be nihilistic at times. But man, it really gives you the sense of wonder that is really captured in this one. There's some really interesting concepts. There's some reveals that happen in the book that you just don't see coming. And it's all done in about like 120 pages. And it was just fantastic. Then next up was Moving Mars by Greg Bear. Now, this one this was a little bit of a letdown for me. The first 2/3 of the book was a lot of character development and some world building, and then the last third of the book, there is some major events, some crazy concepts. The book really accelerates towards the end, and the ending is fantastic, and the whole last third, but it took a long time to get there, and you're even kind of wondering if all that really made a difference, all that world building and character building. It was still a great book. I'm glad I read it, but overall, it was just a little bit of a letdown, but I definitely want to read more from Greg Bear in the future. Then I read The Space Merchants by Frederick Pohl and C.M. Kornbluth. This is one that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. It's kind of a satire on capitalism and the advertising industry, but there's a lot more to it than that. These guys were a great team of writers. They had a very interesting way that they would collaborate together, and it's one of those books that came out a long time ago. This came out like in the 50s, and they were way ahead of their time for what they were doing, and I think most people that really get into some of the classic science fiction, you'll definitely run across this book at some point, and I definitely recommend reading that one. And then next up was The Humanoids by Jack Williamson. This is another really important book from the 40s, and I really enjoyed it. I talked a lot in the video about this edition because this has a short story called With Folded Hands, and then at the end there's an essay that Williamson wrote, I think in 1980, which adds a lot more context and layers to this story, The Humanoids, because The Humanoids was good. It did read a little pulpy. Some of the things in there that he introduced, like psionics, I could have maybe done without. But the heart of the story and the ideas is still really good. But I think he captured it better in the short story With Folded Hands. He even mentions that in the essay he did at the end. And then the essay brings up a bunch of other cool ideas and stuff too. So that was a great one. Classic. Really glad I read that one. And then the last book I read this month was The Cosmic Engineers by Clifford Simic. This was Simic's first book. He wrote this like in 1939 when it was serialized in the magazines, and then it came out like around 1950 as a novel. And I'm going to be doing by the time this video comes out, we probably will have already done a discussion on Sean D. Standfast's channel about this one. I liked it. It was definitely kind of pulpier and had some weirdness going on with some of the science and the characters and stuff, but you could see all the little seeds that were in Simic's head and that would later get really fleshed out, some of these themes and ideas. And so it was very interesting going back and reading that, but it's probably not one for everyone. So now to pick my book of the month. You know, I'm kind of torn between the Space Merchants and the Star Virus, but I'm going to have to give it to the Star Virus. This is one that I keep thinking about. I think very soon I'm probably going to reread it and then do like a spoiler video on this one, because he really came up with some really interesting ideas with this artifact that happens to be in this book and the title of the book and everything. There's some reveals that are just mind-blowing. It's a great book, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. And then I guess I'll mention I'm in the middle of reading The Girl from the Emeraldine Island. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through this one. This is the wife's wildcard pick, so that'll be a review coming out soon. And then I've been reading through the best of Henry Kuttner's short stories here and there. I'm a little the way in, and we'll be doing a discussion with Matt and Richard over at that one will be on Matt's channel, I believe, in about a week or so. So I'm slowly reading through some of those. Okay, so now let's talk about what I'm going to be kind of reading more in the month of March. So I have a couple things for sure. So I'm going to be reading Half Past Human by T.J. Bass, and I'm going to do a buddy read with Deb over at Omnivorous Reader. We've been talking about this one. She read the book that follows this, and I've been wanting to read these two books for a really long time. So we've been kind of emailing back and forth, and she's trying to track down a copy. I think she finally got her copy, and so I'll do a buddy read with her on that one. And then I got quite a few buddy reads going on in March. We got Arthur C. Clarke, The Fountains of Paradise, and this is going to be a buddy read with Robin over at Bookspin, and that'll probably be sometime in the first half of the month. And then the second half of the month, I'm going to be reading The Mote in God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell, and I'll be doing a buddy read with Bart over at Bart's Book Space on this one. Really excited to have a discussion with Bart on that one. And then just a couple other ideas I'm thinking about for the month. I've been wanting to get to this one, The Orchid Cage by Herbert W. Franke. This is a pretty thin, maybe short read that I'd like to get to maybe in March if I have time. And then I've been listening to the audiobook of Dance Macabre by Stephen King, and it's a book he wrote, I think, in the early 80s, and he's kind of dissecting the horror genre, both in film and TV and in print. And he brought up a couple authors that I've read recently, and it's really made me want to revisit these authors. So he talks a lot about Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. And a commenter on the channel, Seven Planets, has recommended this book a lot. King briefly mentions this book. He doesn't really dissect this one. But I really loved Rosemary's Baby and the way Levin writes, and so I'd like to get to that one here in the near future, hopefully in March. And then another book that King talked about in that book, Dance Macabre, is The Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. And I got this copy of Time and Again recently and had multiple people recommend this one. And I did love The Body Snatchers. Finney is a great author. And I'd really like to see what he does with this kind of like time travel one. So those are some ideas that I've got for the month. We'll see where it all plays out. But, you know, let me know what you read in February and tell me what your book of the month was. And let me know what you're thinking about reading in March. And that's going to be it for this video. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.